Grognard Games. My name is Martin. I'm your host for today, and today I have with me the rather illustrious original D&D'er, Mr. Tim Kask. But before we go into the conversation, I wanted to say very much a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed and supported the channel. We're only actually 21 videos in, and we have over 1,000 subscribers. I think we're nearly 1,020 or so, which over 6 months and only 20 videos. Only 9 of which have this superb featured face. On the video, I obviously have a face for radio. What I suspect is happening that people are turning on Grognard Games, they switch off the image, and then they do the ironing while they listen to my lovely, luxurious voice. Everything has its positives and plus sides. Tim, I want to open up with something from this particular box, and I think it's very important, and it's a statement, which is, why have us do any more of your imagining for you, which was Gary Gygax's original words from the original OD&D box set. And I'm talking pretty much in reference to published adventures, people not using their own imaginations, and I think that statement says a lot about the ethos of 1974. Go.
Indeed. The reason Gary and I hit it off so instantaneously nearly was that we had the Appendix N, I believe it's called, in common. I had read a lot of those books too. We had a lot of common ground, a lot of common background, and so our imaginings worked along similar pathways because we came from the same places. Today what I see, I go into the big game store and there's 80 different adventures you can pick and choose over the various role-playing systems. And of course we know that almost any of them can be modified to play almost any game with. And there's no incentive to create anything on your own when it's easier to go get this. Now I understand that if you're busy and the campaign's just kind of gotten away from you and you need to take a break while you catch up, picking up a module or two, as I still call them, an adventure or two, is perfectly legitimate. Absolutely, there's a place for it. But I meet more and more people that have never created their own dungeon, ever. They've done nothing but buy pre-made stuff and run it. And that's like only wanting to be the assistant director in the movie and not the director or the producer. It's so much more fun to be the director and the producer if only you find that out.
But what do you put that down to? Because the original ethos, when the first module hit TSR's desks, Palace of the Vampire Queen.
Oh no, that wasn't the first.
That wasn't? Oh,
no,
we'll come back to that then. So the adventures
right.
come in and people kind of look at them and go, well, hang on, this is kind of against what we're trying to do. Obviously there was a business model to be had there whereby obviously we can write this thing, we can get it out, we can put our vision of different things out, people can enjoy what we're putting out, people who maybe don't have the time, and let's be honest, there are people that aren't as creative as other people and they do need a little bit of guidance, even if it is a module that they can maybe twist or turn to their own bent, or they can actually just run with it as is. So there is room for everybody in this hobby. However, it has changed quite a bit, hasn't it? It's gone from pure, absolute, your imagination to here's a book and you really should kind of play it this way.
Yes. There was another company besides TSR that set out to help people imagine, and then they're imagining. It's called the Judges Guild. The Judges Guild really kind of started up as sort of a what was then called an amateur press thing, and it was a guild of DMs that shared ideas, and one thing led to another, and pretty soon they became an entity that shared these things, and TSR licensed them. I vetted their stuff for a while, and we licensed them because we couldn't, and we tried to make up for the fact that not everybody had read hardly anything out of Appendix N. And we realized that we all of us early players were all people that had read extensively out of Appendix N, or found out about books through just talking about them, went out and got them, you know, because Appendix N obviously hadn't been compiled yet. But we were trying with Blackmore. Blackmore was the first time when we gave him a fully developed temple. the Temple of the Frog, with guards and station, duty rotations,
Yeah.
all the kind of things that's saying, hey, well, here's one way to do it. Now, we thought that they were going to then do their own after they saw how to do that. Didn't quite work that way. We only started putting out adventures because we had to standardize tournaments. And that was the Against the Giants. G1, G2, G3 was set up as a tournament, and it was wildly popular. So, okay, we made money. But every time we put out one of these things, we told people, change it. If you want to change it, change it. And nobody ever did. And so we've all contributed to the stultification. And as an ex-teacher, a retired teacher, nobody reads as much today as they did 40 years ago. Nobody does, except us old people that have been doing it for 40 years.
What's the last book you read, out of interest? What's the last 3 books that you read?
The last 3, the new Robin Hobbs about the dragon cycle that she's been writing. I'm not exactly sure of the title. Edward Rutherford's Paris, brand new novel by Edward Rutherford. And before that, Valley Forge by Gingrich and Fortune. That's the last 3 I've read. And in the last week, I've read 3 magazines. So I still read voraciously.
Yeah.
But it's not, we don't see children coming through the school system for the last 20 years that read like that.
No, I've just finished reading Jekyll and Hyde, the Robert Louis Stevenson, and again I've been looking at the language that he uses. He doesn't seem to waste a word in that little concise book. But on the contrary, I've just, on the flip side, just started Gorman Gas, Mervyn Pig, and his vocabulary is enormous. So again, reading for different reasons, and what I wanted to posit and see what your thoughts are on this as a teacher is that it's all very well and good potentially coming to a game as a games master and trying to describe something that I've only seen in the movies using one set of language, which is mine. But all I've got is that one visual reference. However, if I've gone away and I have read multiple volumes of multiple books of different styles, different authors who all have their own voice, their own way of expressing something, I can take that narrative flow and those descriptions, because it is a description, and I can use that description at my table, and I can apply those words to anything. And I personally have noticed a lack of ability to convey a scene in a convincing way, or in a varied way, more to the point as well, throughout the course of a game. And I do believe that is down to literary not really reading as much.
Well, I think that's what led to having to write flavor text. The flavor text was completely unknown. A module or an adventure was a list of rooms, what was in the rooms, until the Invincible City-State of the Overlord came out. That was the first big mini campaign with many smaller adventures contained within it. Still one of the best mega dungeon. I classify it as a mega dungeon. Still one of the best ever done, and still holds up today. The Moonstone Caverns. Oh man, what a little adventure within an adventure. That was great. I tried in my first adventure that I published recently. I tried to tell the DM it was describing a cave, and I tried to just tell the DM to picture in their mind the neatest cave they ever saw and describe it to the players. And my partner said I just couldn't do that. Just couldn't do that. Well, if we're talking about these visual, the generations that follow mine are much more visually oriented, and the current youngest generation is entirely video and visually oriented. If they've seen all this stuff, they must have seen a cave somewhere. It doesn't matter if it's a spectacular cave or a spooky cave. If they can picture it in their mind, they can adequately describe it, and the people there will know in their minds they will all see something rather similar. I argued with this for over a week, and my partner said, no, you can't rely on them. And I thought, my, how sad this is. And then I'm glad I didn't teach creative writing, because the only students that don't know anything about creative writing are already in AP or honors courses, and so they're already fast-tracked, and the rest of them, it's like, well, okay, I guess they don't need much. There's not enough reading being done. In the old days, everything on Appendix N was ripe for stealing from. Poul Anderson's version of the elves, Tolkien's vision of the dwarves, somebody else's vision of some sort of monster, whatever. We picked and plucked all those things out of stuff we remembered, and that's how, those are the words, those are the phrases, that's the image that we were able to draw upon and weave this story together. In my college campaign, when I was, actually playtesting for TSR, unpaid, but that's cool. It was fun. I was consciously stealing from different places, and Gary and I were talking about it, every couple of weeks. How'd it work? What happened? We were trying, magic, powerful swords that take you over are nothing new in fantasy literature. But today I was following a thing on Facebook where this guy's paladin had picked up a sword that had taken him over, and now he was being forced to do nasty things. And several of the responses were like, oh man, the DM jobbed you, quit, walk away. Oh, that shouldn't have happened. What, he took away your own free will without talking to you about it? Well, yeah, the sword took him over, And then a disturbing number of the responses were to the effect that, shame on the GM for doing that to you. Then I found out later that this is an artifact sword. These guys have been playing together for 25 years, and they've known about it for most of those 25 years. They finally found it, and now they're surprised that it took them over. And it's unfair. You ought to leave that group. That's what some of these people are telling them. Ridiculous.
So where do you see things going then? I mean, actually, let me rephrase it. Let me backtrack. What's the advice that you could give to somebody who's a budding GM and they are really wanting to expand the scope of how they communicate a game to their players, and whether that could be in a form of a dialogue, or whether that's the form of setting the scene, or whether that's taking one event and making it to the next one? What sort of advice could you give that's quite easy to follow and like a 3-step program, I guess?
Well, you didn't give me an advance warning on this one, so this is purely on the fly, Martin. Thank you very much. The first thing I do is I tell them to read every book they could possibly find off Appendix N. Every one of those books that you could possibly find. If I had to pick out a few, Fafhrd and the Mouser stories by Fritz, Dying Earth by Jack Vance. If you read The Dying Earth, you'll understand the original concepts of D&D magic. If you read Fafhrd and the Mouser, you get an idea of the classes and how that evolved. And then if you read Poul Anderson and some of the others that are on there, you'll broaden your knowledge. Read some Harold Lamb and some of his if you read these people, you'll become more familiar with the words and the phrasing. You will become a more proficient speaker, because those words and phrases, though you don't know it, never really leave you when you need them, if you read the book. Not if you skimmed it, but if you read it. I can still, remember the time when the first, in 3 Hearts and 3 Lines, the description of the broken sword. I just remember that. And any of those books have things in them, crypts, caverns, the Aurora Borealis, all these guys, they write about everything around us, and everything that's not around us that's in fantasy. And if you read more and more of that stuff, not only will you get great ideas to lift, to make, even if you went and bought it, you can still make it your own. And you can lift all these. We just called it lifting. If you were publishing it, it would be plagiarism. But we're D&Ders. We're not publishing it, so we're lifting it. We're borrowing it. I love Tracy Hicks's Kinder, whatever those little rascals are. Is his idea of a hobbit. I love that little character. You know, I'll talk to Tracy and ask him if I can use it in one of my adventures, and he'll probably say yes. And what a lift. You know, what a lift. Decide who's the elves you like, and then play the elves in your campaign that way, or have multiple septs, multiple tribes of elves. And these are Poul Anderson elves, and these are Tolkien elves, and these are somebody else's elves.
Tempt people onto Poul Anderson. Tell us a little bit about Poul's elves.
They weren't nice. They're not Tolkien elves. They're malicious and ornery. And the only time they ever help anybody is when they serve their own ends. And that's damn seldom. That's what I remember about his elves. And so I have patterned various types of elves. You know, on my world, there are 4 branches of Elvenkind, because the world had a cataclysmic Gondwana broke up and moved all over, and so they all developed over the last 1,000 years in isolation from other elves, and they had to adapt to the terrain that they found themselves on. So I have forest elves, I have prairie elves, I have elves that live in the mountains, I have dwarves that are pirates, because their mountain range got submerged except for the very tops, and so now there's these islands, and only the dwarves know the secrets of them and whatever, and that's one that's in work. And I don't know where I got those from, probably from something like Time Bandits or some you know. And go see all the Monty Python movies. Go see Time Bandits. There's so many interesting movies that are whacked and goofy, but they're meat and potatoes for us, full of ideas, just chock full of ideas. That's what I recommend, is go do that, and then sit down and write flavor text for yourself. And when you're happy with it, run it by a trusted non-player friend, and get comfortable reading it aloud, as you should read it flavor text, loudly, with inflections where necessary, etc. And when you can do that, step 3 is go do it.
Okay. And to go back a little bit to something you touched on earlier, and actually it's in the title of this particular video, it's the social element of the game, or should I say that it's almost like I'll misuse the word deliberately, sort of a socialist idea that everything should just be given away for free. And it's quite prevalent today as well in the old school Renaissance, where it's kind of expected that I will have this for absolutely no financial output of my own. And there's some terrible products out there. There are some very good ones, but there's some true dross out there as well. But we had a conversation about it a while back, whereby TSR had to fight for its existence in terms of pulling in money as a startup company, like all companies who were trying to get off the ground, and yet it seems that there were people who were saying, hey, come on, guys, give it away for free, and kind of the 60s hippie.
Well, yeah, okay, it's important to note the culture of the late 60s, early 70s, and it's also important to note that the Midwest, Wisconsin, is a year or two behind the 2 coasts. So in '69, they were what was going on in '67 on the coast, and I grew up in that area. So I'm denigrating myself as well as all the other fine people that live in that part of the Midwest. So we had the hippie and all the things that took with it. a more relaxed, oh, wait a minute, let's step back and take a look at this. Let's share the commune thing. All that was going on at that point in time, but when they told us that, in a sense, what really frosted us was they basically were saying, we can do it better, give it to us. And it's like the hubris that you can do it better. Okay, I'll give you my means of livelihood. You do it better. Now, how do I make a living? You know, I've spent a year and a half tweaking this game and, you know, all the other things that we did. And this sprung up in the amateur press in about 76 or 77 on the East Coast first. The West Coast amateur press was a few years later in developing. And the amateur press was a farce. I found good writers there.
Yeah.
I found several that I ended up having writing for Little Wars or for Dragon, and later Adventure Gaming. But the amateur press was anybody that had a typewriter and a Xerox, a mimeograph machine, or a spirit copier back then, could send their stuff. There would be anywhere from 30 to 75 people that would subscribe to this thing. And so you had to send a copy for everybody. And then Lee Gold did Alarms and Excursions for years, and she went on to do much better stuff. She would have to collate them all. And they started going off in bizarre directions. And we were like, no, we're not going there. We're not going to get into sexuality. And then it was like, well, you guys have screwed it up so bad, you ought to just give it to us and let us go. And we were fighting tooth and nail. People were buying, one guy would buy the books and then make 10 copies. You know, because again, we were a lot of the early customers were on college campuses, so they had access to copiers, mimeograph machines. They could go in late at night and make 10 copies. In the early days, we used to go around and take them away from people at cons. Wow. They were illegal. And you know, it was like, go ahead and complain. Go ahead, call the police if you want to. But, you know, you cheated us out of $100. Well, you know, you cheated us out of the proceeds from 10 copies by doing that. And the reason we started publishing the G series in blue is that color blue is called Photo Dropout. It can't be photocopied.
I did not know that. I'm going to have a go at that tomorrow at work.
Well, and it was years later that Saran, one of the plastic wrap people, put out a yellow and a green Saran for holidays. You can put the yellow one over the light blue, and it'll copy on black and white just fine. But it took them several years before Saran came out with those colored films. Now, if you worked in a photo lab or something, you probably knew you could use colored film. But what it did is it just dramatically reduced thefts. And that's stealing. And you make unauthorized copies. Now, if it's yours, if you buy it and you want to make a copy so that you can mark it up and put yours away, that's perfectly legal. But you can't make 5 more and give them to your friends. That's against copyright laws in just about every country I know of.
And how do you view PDF sharing on file sharing sites and BitTorrent and that kind of thing? Because I see that quite blatantly as theft.
Well, that's now the Wizard's problem to deal with. We didn't have that to deal with.
I mean, for books in general. Books in general.
Yeah, well, it's a crying shame. I'm still a voracious reader, and I went to the library today, and good golly, it took me 30 minutes to find the first book that I thought I wanted to read. Of course, it's a branch, and I've been going to it for 30 years, but it's still 30 minutes to find a book I wanted to read. I haven't read that many, just the ones that I like. Yeah, the book trades off. Gygax Magazine, we're having a hard sell with print advertising. You know, we're printing 6,000 copies, which means that 15,000 people are seeing them, but it's still a tough sell.
Yeah.
Very tough sell right now. I don't have a problem with PDFs. Gygax Magazine sells PDFs. Eldritch Enterprises, my other endeavor, we sell PDFs. We sell many more PDFs, I believe, than we do print on demands, a hard copy. But if you're going to share them, that's why we like to watermark them. PDFs that are watermarked says that it was made for so-and-so. And if you're not so-and-so, you're showing everybody that you stole it. And that's all we can do is try to shame them.
It's a shame, really. Just as a different analogy, some friends of mine, Norwegian musicians, they used to put out some music. It would take them 2 years to compose, write, put everything together, get the artwork done, the lyrics, everything set properly in the books, the distribution, get it out there, and then some shit would pre-release leak it, and then it was out on the internet before it was even out. And you know what? After 4 recordings, they called it a day because it cost them a year's worth of work, a year worth of salary, basically, of incoming royalties to produce, and it took them 2 years to make. So how do you reconcile that? So essentially, their own fans were putting them out of business. And I find it, although the idea of giving stuff away is laudable and it's a very noble thing, unfortunately, people need to make ends meet to pay their mortgages.
Well, now, both Eldritch Enterprises and Gygax Magazine, we've had this discussion already, that we will do giveaways. If exigency forced us to print a map in the magazine in black and white, but we have it in color, you can go to our website and download it. We already have plans for a couple of those that they're going to do that way. It's the same with Eldritch. We have plans to do that too. So we'll give away extras. But if you don't have the book, just having the map, okay, you got a pretty map. And, you know, if you're going to play on a stolen map, okay, big deal. I used to lift maps all the time. You know, I just lift a map out of something and then erase all the names. And I can't draw maps worth a damn. Well, anything that doesn't have a ruler and squares, I can't draw with a damn.
I wanted to ask you, and I'm sorry, I'm going to drop this on you, and I'm going to caveat this with, I think that everybody watching this, I do thoroughly believe, as I'm sure Mr. Kask does, that everybody can play their game however they feel, and however you want to play and enjoy yourself is however you play, and that's how you enjoy yourself. But what do you like to see in a game? As first of all, as the guy running it, who's put it together, who's done the research, and has put the thought into everybody else having a good time that evening or that day, and then what do you like to see as a player when you play in a game, and what's the sort of energy you like to feel between the other guys at the table and the guy who's running it for you, who's spent that time trying to make sure you have a good time?
Okay, I'm not running a local campaign right now, but I do go to cons, 4 or 5 cons a year, and I run games at cons. And I get to see, what I see from behind the screen, my favorite thing is the synergy that a group of strangers will form within a 40-minute time period. I always take pre-gens, pre-generated characters, and there's always, like, there's 15 in my assortment, and I never run a game for more than 8 or 9. So just in picking, they start working with each other. Well, if you're going to be the cleric, then I'll be this. Okay, and I love watching that develop. And then I require, before we even start, that they prearrange and write out on a sheet of paper their marching order. One, it's single file, double file, three. Their watches, if they're going to be in overnight, who's on the first watch, who's on the second watch, who's on the third watch. All in advance, before we even roll the first die. Because if you do that then, you can play 40 more minutes of actual gameplay later, because you're not worried who was where that time. You know, if there's 8 guys and a boulder comes out of nowhere, I roll an 8-sider. Bob, you just got whacked with a rock. Yeah. What do you mean I go? Well, I hit you, dude. Sorry. You know, and so it takes all that out. If something happens at night, a die roll decides what watch. I generally have them set up 3-hour watches, and I roll a 6-sider. You know, and okay, if something happens or might happen, then it's on what watch. It's automatic. We already know who's awake. It makes them think that they've got to have at least 2 uninterrupted watches of sleep if they're going to replenish their spells. Okay, so it makes them start thinking in advance right away. And then the best time is when the guy that was kind of quiet, or lady, or girl, or boy, because I've had children playing recently, they've been sitting there quiet, playing along, having a good time, they're smiling, and then all of a sudden, they come up against something, and that individual goes, but the answer is, and brilliance comes out of this person you least expected it from. He sees right through the heart of the matter. That just turns me on enormously. To see that happen, to see that social interaction, and then if you did it right, they don't want to leave. They stand up there talking, rehashing what happened. I'm known for TPKs, total party kills, because I always, you don't have to fight anything in any adventure I write. There's always a way to get around it. But the convention mentality is, we're all Vikings. Give me an axe or a sword. I'm going out swinging, and we'll all have a mead and Valhalla tonight. And then they'll stand there for 30 minutes and talk about how much fun they all had just dying miserably. Well, when you do that, you're doing it right, you know. And I'm not bragging on myself. I'm saying that for any DM watching this. If there's memorable events that they talk about later, whether later's after the game or the next time you get together, or 3 months from now when you're just sitting around yarning, and they bring that back up, you did it right that night. And I've been sharing this with several sources lately. Just before we moved into the hobby shop out of Gary's house, he and I were sitting in his study. I don't believe I shared this with you. And we were doing what we call blue sky. We would just imagine crazy things, you know, like one of them was, yeah, next year we'll sell 10,000 copies of D&D and laugh our heads off, have another sip of scotch and another puff on a cigar. We only did this very rarely, but this was a Friday and we're going to be in the new building on Monday. And Gary made the comment, and it led the discussion along, that if we had any legacy that we wanted to be known for, what we did, we being Dave and Brian and Gary and me and, you know, Dave Sutherland, you know, the original crew, we gave socially inept or uncomfortable people a mechanism to socialize and become more sociable with other people who are having a problem. You know, it goes hand in hand. Social awkwardness has a corollary with several psychological conditions and intelligence. Really, really, really smart people have a real hard time interacting with other people around them. They're existing on a different plane. Well, that sentiment 2 years ago was brought home to me again when I was stopped in the hall at Gen Con by a guy who was very polite, big, tall man, very polite, and he wanted to tell me that all the trouble that he'd stayed out of and how he found a group of friends, and they all, you know, and so I had, long story short, I said, well, what do you do now? He was a federal circuit court judge. And I said, well, I guess we didn't ruin you quite completely, did we? And we had a good laugh about it. 3 weeks ago at Gen Con, I found myself talking to a young man who said that he found D&D when he was 15, and by 18 he was fronting a band. He said he never talked to anybody. He felt like a loner. He found D&D, and by 18 he was a front man on a band, rapping with the girls in the front row. You know, he said it enabled him to come out. So if I got to have something to be said about me when they shove my box into the furnace, that'll be okay with me. That'll be okay with me. We developed a means for socially awkward people to interact and learn social skills. And I think we made the world a little better place.
There's one interesting thing about this, is that also, I don't, more than that, and I think that I'm going to go into a little bit of an idea. I'll share it with you, and then if you could give me your idea. What are we drinking? I just don't care. Okay.
No, we're drinking diet water.
Water.
Flavored water. It's flavored water.
I see a lot of, well, this rule does this, and how do you resolve this rule? And these rules in this edition of this game are different to this one, and it evolved this way. And I see a lot of this kind of discussion about role-playing games on the internet, and I personally find it a shame, and I don't think that that's particularly testament to what the originators put together, because my idea, rightly or wrongly, is actually that I think people should be discussing much more about how would you do this scene, how would you create this and move this part of the story forward if your players do this. And people don't have a dialogue about the creativity. I don't see this kind of storytelling, stroke acting, stroke creation, stroke anything you want to insert here in the game. I only see discourse about rules or discourse about a setting which somebody else has created, not you. And I think that personally, I do find that a shame, and maybe it's a loftier expectation, but with gamers being potentially of the more intellectual kind of bent and maybe being more creative, I would expect more than just discourse on rules, more about how to extrapolate information, how to share information, how to be this, how to be that, how to create this scene that everybody is a part of. I don't see much of that, and I wonder why.
Well, the power gamer is one cause. The original ethic in D&D, and I know I date myself, but I don't care. I'm proud of it. In 1974, the highest thing you could hope for was making around 9th or 10th level, building yourself a castle, hiring some retainers, carving yourself out a little barony in the wilderness, and starting a new character. And then later on, that guy with his 20 mounted archers and his 40 footmen would be in a chainmail battle when you were fighting with the orc army. That happened in the campaign. Don't see that anymore because everybody wants to be a power gamer. They want to be 25th level. They want to go wipe out Valhalla. Just depopulate Valhalla, destroy the Bifrost Bridge. I've never understood that. I always felt that the fun of the game was the struggle to survive. Now, do I make people, when I do play locally, do I make them start over at first? No. This isn't Dungeon Crawl Classics. And that game's great. I'm not knocking it. Joe Goodman's got a great game there. But it's just a different ethic. There, you expect to die. You go into the game at a beginning level. They call it a funnel level with 9 characters stacked up. You just throw them away as they die. But ours was the struggle, and ours was well, if you can't beat it today, run away and come back, heal up, hire a gunslinger, go find a big. If you're only 3rd and 4th level, go find a 6th level fighter that'll be your meat sack and your meat shield out front. So what if you got to give him 30%? You wouldn't get the other 70% without him. That was creative problem solving. I don't see that happening. The argument about rules, they're developed a mindset of the DM is out to get us. It's our duty to get the DM. Jolly Blackburn in his Knights of the Dinner Table comic does a very good take on that, kind of tongue-in-cheek. He has a couple of people that play like that, and I laugh at them, because if you think the DM's out to get you, why are you there? That's the question I never gotten an answer to. Why would you give up 4 or 5 hours of your life every week if you're playing against somebody that you know is just out to get you? Are you a glutton for punishment? Are you an RPG masochist? I don't understand that.
I think the answer to that secret is going to be that you cannot kill the GM. He is the universe. He will just implode it on you.
Well, no. Now the arbitrary decisions like that, that's not fair either. certainly we can do that. I have never just, well, I'll take that back. Once at a con, I just killed a character because he was annoying the whole table. And they all thanked me for it when he left. That's the only time I've ever done that. I've never done it in a face-to-face game of my own or my own campaign. I don't know. I think they argue about rules because they're not confident in their DMing. I think if you got to figure it's the us versus them, and the player is there to hold them to the rules, I think you either got the wrong players or the wrong GM. Now, if you can find a GM that believes he's out to get you, and you believe he's out to get you, fine. Just go lock yourselves in a dark room and poke each other with sharp sticks all night long. I'm okay with that. Just don't expect me to join in. You know, that's not my bag. I'm not going to do that. I don't understand where that mindset came. Well, I know where it came from. It's a lack of trust. What do you mean my guy died? Well, you know, we rolled the dice and he died. You know, when I'm playing at a con, I'll always tell them what they need to roll. You know, if they're trying some harebrained scheme or they're fighting an ogre, I'll tell them what they need to roll. And if they don't roll it, okay, I didn't roll it. Oh, shoot. You know, you're going to question why I gave you that number that you needed to roll, or better or less, you know, or whatever. Well, then, if there's no trust implicit between the players, I don't understand why anybody stays in that circumstance.
Okay. Another question to drop on you. Actually, another two.
All right. I'm quite adroit at this.
Top three.
It's hard to take my aplomb.
Top 3 tips for being a great DM at the table. Not pre-prep, at the table.
First, engage all the players. If you got two that are sitting quiet, single them out and point at them. Now, rather than embarrass them, if you sense that they're a little shy, then you go around the table and you go, you, what are you doing? 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 Okay, and you get them each to give you a commitment of what they're doing. Now they're all committed to the game equally. Now you just got to keep that up. Keep your players engaged. Keep them all engaged. Give everybody an equal opportunity. Go with the flow.
Yeah. Tip 2?
Go with the flow. That's tip 2. Go where the adventure takes you. If they think up an ingenious solution to if you've got a problem, you've set them, and they think of a perfectly logical, logistical, legally okay, different way to solve it than you thought up, okay, let them have it and go on. Don't argue about it. And the third one is, don't argue with a rule. Make a ruling and go on. Don't argue about it. Make a ruling and go on. It's all about rulings and not rules. Make a ruling, get on with it. Okay, get your people engaged. Engage all your people. Okay? And then you'll start. Go where they take you. I have taken the same adventures to cons, run them 4 times at a single con, and not one of them has developed after the first intersection where they could go left, right, or straight ahead. Not one of them has ever followed the exact same track that any other one ever did. And that's all people, you know, like if I'm at Total Con in the Boston area, that's all Upper East Coast gamers. So if there's a way to play Upper East Coast, they would all play it. Okay, but they still all play it differently. You got to go where they take you. And that means the third thing is make a ruling. Go on with it. Guy says that he's going to do some crazy physical stunt, and he stunt. You know, he gives it all out to you. He's got a high dex. He's got a good strength. Okay, give him a 30% chance of pulling it off. Make a ruling. Let him roll. Hey, he made it. Ah, well, we didn't think that would work anyway. You know, roll a d4 for damage. You know, don't punish trying. That's a fourth tip. don't punish trying. Or that's 3A. Don't punish trying. Make a ruling. Let them try what they want to do and go on.
Okay. On the flip side,
and if
this
you
is
tell them it's 30...
a bit more of an open question,
right.
Including pre-prep, being a good player at the table. Everybody talks about DM advice and GM advice, but what about being a good player?
Well, what I find when I'm on that side of the screen, which is usually at a convention, usually in a charity event, and so it's very often there's a lot of laughing and carrying on going on. Very old school. We don't take it that seriously, you know. Give me challenges. Give me a viewpoint that I haven't seen before. You don't have to invent some weirdly bizarre monster. Take a regular one and have him act in a weirdly bizarre, different way that I don't expect. Nothing irritates me either side of the screen as much as the guy that sits there and go, oh, that's a Bandersnatch. 68 hit dice, does this for damage, that for that, and watch out for his gauge. Oh, man, no, not my Bandersnatch. That may be the way they work where you come from, son, but mine do it a little differently. Now, am I cheating them? Does that mean that I'm cheating them? That I'm against the players because my Bandersnatch doesn't react the way the one did in Monty Python? Or maybe mine acts like the one in Monty Python and not the one in the VM in the Monster Manual. I'm just saying. Is that where this us against the DM came from? You changed the stats. You're trying to cheat us. I don't know. That may be. That may be. But, give me something challenging. Speak up when you're on that side. Don't be afraid to speak up. You may think, this is probably a silly idea. No, don't ever think that unless you know it's a silly idea. Because more often than not, you have intuitively looked into something and seen a solution. And so, I would say at least 50% of the time, it works. At least that's the way I run my games, old school, go with the flow, It works. And so those intuitive insights should be shared with the party. And if the party's floundering, step up as a leader until somebody else wants to lead. Direct them. Take them along with you. And you'll have more fun. They'll have more fun. And maybe you'll find somebody that, okay, your turn to lead. And then you can step back to the back.
That's 2 tips. How about a third one?
Oh, my. Make sure you got plenty of good dice. They have to be well-trained. If you're a player, they have to be well-trained. They've got to give you what you need when you need it. As a DM, you let them fall where they may. As a player, you put more mental waves into getting a high number or whatever you need, a high result, a low result. You put more mental waves trying to do a Uri Geller and bend that spoon on that die. So you better have dice you trust.
Cool.
I have a friend who decimates you.
I think that those tips, all 6 of them, actually 6.5 of them, are a fantastic place actually to leave this until next time.
Okay.
There were a couple of other subjects we were going to go into, but I'm quite conscious that when the interviews go on a bit too long, when I look back at the statistics, people do drop off at the end, and I don't want that to happen to my guests. I want them to see everything all the way through every single time. So, guys, thank you very much for watching. Tim, you will be back, I'm absolutely certain. Potentially in a different hat.
Well,
maybe.
My leather one is being repaired.
I just noticed the collection behind you. Is that a Ghostbusters hat?
No. Good Lord, no. No, I have a lot of ball caps, and sometime I'll hold my camera up and down and show you. But no, my leather iconic cap, the one that on my Facebook page and everything, is being repaired by a cousin who is a leather worker. Putting a new lining in it, a new headband, and I hope I will have it back in time for TotalCon in Boston. So this is my summer weight replacement. Otherwise, if I took this off, the glare from the overhead lights would blind your camera. I don't tan my head. My father got melanomas on his bald head, so I don't get sunburn on my head. No.
Good idea. Tim, thank you once again for spending
My pleasure.
so much time with everybody who's watching this. Thank you for taking the time out. And you guys, thank you for watching. We will see you next time.